Hello, everyone, and good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to another thrilling episode of Cloud on Air. If you're new here, welcome. If you're joining us for, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth time, welcome back. We're so excited to have you here. This is our weekly stream where we talk all things Google Cloud Tech, what's going on. We talk to the experts who build and make and work with these tools live on the air, and we take your questions along the way. I'm Chloe Condon. I'm a Senior Developer Relations Engineer here at Google Cloud. I am your weekly hostess with the mostest every week, and each week we have different guests, so make sure you join us for future ones. We'll get to that in a minute here. A couple quick things before we introduce our super special guest today. So if you're joining us live, first of all, say hello in the chat. And you may notice this lovely chat that is situated around this video. This is your place to interact with other viewers and to also let us know any questions that you have. We have folks who are going to be in there answering your questions, and if you're lucky, we may answer your question live on the air towards the end of the session. So stay tuned for that. You may hear your question read and answered by myself and our expert of the day. And also, we do these streams every week, every Wednesday, same time, same place. You can go to cloudonair.withgoogle.com to see not only all of our upcoming streams, but also all our previous streams. You can watch them on demand and see all the fun stuff that we've been doing here week after week. We know you're busy. We know you can't join us live every week. So, all right. And if you're joining us in the future, ooh, spooky, and watching this on demand yourself, join us for a live one. We would love to have you in the chat and join our nice little community that we have here online. All right. Let's get into the most important thing here today. Our guest today, I'm very excited for, is someone that I am constantly talking about Broadway shows with at work, but we're not going to talk about Broadway shows today. We're going to talk about a different show. Balaji Rajam, welcome. You are a part of our global solutions engineering team here at Google.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah, as part of the global solutions team, our focus is trying to find problems which most of our customers are facing and build solutions which help them solve the problem. And congratulations, I saw you on the developer keynote at Next. Love the Plink Placer.
Thank you so much. We had such a good time. For those who don't know, Next 2024, our cloud conference in Las Vegas, was just a mere 2 weeks ago. Feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
How was your Google Cloud Next this year?
It was wonderful, right? I was down in the expo floor working a couple of the booths, talking to a lot of customers. So one of the wonderful things about Next is you get a spectrum of customers. Too often we talk to like large enterprise customers. Here we also got like a lot of smaller customers and a lot of the interesting use cases which they're thinking about and how they want to use our technology. It's always very refreshing to hear. It always gets me very energized. How was yours?
It was good. I learned a lot, a lot of exciting announcements about databases, which we're talking about today. But what I loved the most about being at Google Cloud Next was, we've been doing these virtual events for a long time, and I really missed the hallway conversations.
Absolutely.
Because, we have our community here for Cloud on Air where we're in the chat and we're interacting, but there's really something unique about actually interacting face-to-face with people and sort of those like one-off product feedback things, or maybe it's like, hey, I'm using this tool in a different, interesting way. So those conversations were really cool and valuable to me, and the talks were really great too.
Couldn't agree more. The whole in-person experience adds a completely different dimension to how you really interact with customers and the kind of insights you get, because in chat, a lot of things are left unsaid, which you cannot really read. When you're in person, you're talking to them, you can go off on tangents and talk like a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful experience for me as well.
And so many amazing talks. If anyone wants to check out any of the talks, a lot of them are available on YouTube. Check out the Google Cloud YouTube and Google Cloud Tech YouTube channel. Were you able to catch any talks while you were at Next?
Couple of them. One was around implementing. It actually kind of ties back into our topic, actually. It was about how do you leverage databases to build GenAI-powered apps. I think it was by Harish Jayakumar and Sean Ree. who did those talk. That was a wonderful talk to check out if people are interested in that topic.
Ooh, yes, check that one out. I kind of stuck to my bread and butter, actually. I saw a talk similar to one of our previous on-demand streams that was all about how to stay productive, which we're going to talk about today as well. As a developer, like staying in a flow state and using Gemini and AI tools to help you stay focused, which I need.
Yes,
I need a lot less
needed.
context switching. I think that may have been the title of the talk, less context switching, more flow state or something like that. But yeah, I learned a lot of Gemini on the brain, it seems.
AI.
Have you heard of this word?
Have you heard of AI?
AI? I wonder what that stands for. Well, today, hopefully you're in the right place. You had to register for this event, so I hope you're in the right place. We're talking all about integrating Gemini with your database for advanced analysis. Okay, that's a lot of words. Let's break that down.
Yes. So I started as a developer. I'll show my age. I started writing C++ code on Unix, working against databases. At that point, when we were building those applications, you never really thought about databases. It was also the situation that databases was this kind of strange world, if you want to call it, because the database admins own the databases and they will provision databases for you to use in your applications. But now with the use of cloud, that has changed, right? You think a little bit more about databases. You have a lot more freedom to use databases as well. And actually now that we are getting into the AI space, the use of databases is changing a lot more, right? So now developers are starting to think more about, hey, what is the database I'm going to use for my app? And what are the features which I need in my app? It is not just related to, oh, I just need a place to store my data.
Yeah. Well, I feel it's very interesting now that I'm incorporating AI into my development lifecycle, so to speak. I'm noticing that these big decisions that I needed to either make really, really early on or very far into my development process, I'm now able to just ask Gemini, like, hey, here's what I'm building, here's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
I'm sure this is completely changing the way people are programming now and thinking about using databases.
Absolutely. I think one of the things which you announced next was the Gemini in Google Cloud databases as well, where it can help you make some of those recommendations and decisions because it doesn't have to be this mystery box anymore, right? It actually really democratizes the use of databases. And with the AI, it's actually like a two-sided thing. One is AI is actually simplifying the use of databases, and at the same time, you're also having AI kind of powering the lot of new innovations in databases as well, because the demands on databases are increasing.
Yeah, I also feel like it's making me think about not only the processes differently, but like I used to dread, I build my app, I get it deployed, and I'm like, oh my gosh, tests.
Yes.
I need to build tests. And I always felt that way about databases as well. So now it's nice to just have this all seamlessly. I mean, we'll get into all of the Gemini Code Assist and the chat and everything of that regard in a minute here. But what I'm really loving about this new kind of world, and gosh, first of all, I wish I had Gemini when I first started to learn how to program. I would be opening up a lot less extra tabs all the time. But it's so nice to almost just have, like, you explained it earlier before we got on camera, almost like, when you're prompting these things, you're prompting it like you would, or explaining it to a junior developer.
Exactly.
But having Gemini as part of my workflow is like having a more senior developer to be like, hey, can you help me out with this thing? I've never, what kind of database should I use?
Yes, totally. One of the things which it at times reminds me of was when I started learning computer science back in the day, you used to write algorithms, right? And one of the things which I still remember writing is, teach a robot how to go to a store and buy a carton of milk. There, your instructions had to be very, very elaborate and specific. Kind of like how we do prompt engineering with Gemini, right?
Yeah, like the classic, in 5th grade, our teacher had us write how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then she went in front of the class and she read each one, but one of them forgot to open, box or bag of bread, and we'd have to start or take off lid from jar. So that's been really a fun part of kind of relearning how to program, but it's easier but learning, and we'll get to this. Prompt engineering is a very interesting and specific skill. It does a lot different more different. Writing natural language is very different than just putting keywords into Google.
Absolutely. Like what you said, right? The relearning process is quite interesting to me because when we were in college, right, learning programming languages, you spend so much time learning semantics.
Yes.
Right? Oh, this is how you structure a for loop. These are the punctuation marks which need to go into your for loop, depending on which
How many times have I wanted to throw my computer in the ocean over a semicolon? Yes.
Totally, right? Like, oh, you do a compilation. Oh, you forgot this semicolon, my friend. So that has been the most interesting part, right? I can free myself from semantics of a programming language and start writing code. But should we get back to our topic?
Yes. So how does this all come into the database of it all? Because I feel like I've done a lot of the programming and debugging and maybe the testing and the deploying, but I've not played around with a lot of the database features.
That's true for a lot of developers, right? It's not something new because database is provisioned to them. Somebody gives them a connection string to a database and they just use it.
Yes.
But if you look at Google Cloud's portfolio of databases, right, if you look at any application which you build, there are two things which come into play. One is your runtime and then is your database. And Google Cloud has been a leader in both of those. Essentially, if you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant, you'll see Google Cloud all the way to the right to the top, right, where we have been a leader both in the database space as well as container management. So we kind of bring both those superpowers to work for our developers who want to build like very cool applications.
And you mentioned runtime. I mean, of course, like when we're figuring out how we want to store our data, we want the best possible runtime.
Yep.
And oftentimes, I know I'm not an expert at that, so having Gemini to ask and get information from,
Completely.
Love this.
Yes, it's having this person who has read this whole library full of books, and you can ask them, hey, tell me what is this command doing, or what is this particular feature doing, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the key capabilities which have been built as part of our containers or databases, you have really integrated capabilities which customers need today to really build Gen AI powered apps, right? Whether it is being able to use GPUs and TPUs with our containers when you're running it, because there are people who want to train their own models, run their own inferencing because they have very specific needs. So being able to do all of that on something like GKE is an awesome capability for them because they're so used to using containers, right? So this kind of extends that further. And then when you come to our databases, we have like full-fledged AI assistants for managing and creating your databases, which are highly available as well. And then it can support diverse use cases from like using NoSQL or like relational databases to doing data analytics and so on. Because if you look at a lot of the way the application has been built out, you build your application with a transactional database. And then, yes, I need to do data analytics. So I need to now invest in a data warehouse. Now AI has added this other layer where, I need a vector database. So I need another database. So now you're left managing 3 or 4 databases for your application.
Well, we talked about this a little bit, I think, in the developer keynote at Next, that we're not only doing DevOps, we're also doing AI ops. So we're not only dealing with the database on maybe our application, but now if we're building our own LLMs and incorporating those things, we have to think about databases for multiple pieces of our project now.
Absolutely, because that is becoming a huge part of how you bridge your operational data with the kind of core services which you want to build. Database kind of becomes the glue to be tying your operational data, which is your sales data or inventory data and so on, to finally the LLM models and so on.
Great.
Cool. So moving on, so these are some of the our key databases, right, which we have built over time, and these actually power a lot of the Google Cloud services which people use on a daily basis. We have Spanner, we have Bigtable, and Firestore, which provides like 99.99% SLA, uptime SLA, right? Because there's a reality of Google. Anytime you go to google.com, it's always up.
Yes.
Right, and provide unlimited scaling because nothing really operates at the scale of Google. Google, and these products were built to power Google services as part of that. And then we have automatic sharding and essentially zero-touch global replication, because if you look at traditional databases, they are all a lot of them are constrained by the CAP theorem, right? Spanner is actually one which violates the CAP theorem, where you can actually have a fully consistent database spread across the globe, which provides scale and performance and availability all at the same time.
And okay, I'm sure we're going to get into this, but I'm seeing security capabilities on here. I'm thinking about all of the lovely folks joining us at home who are thinking, okay, how does this? I'm an on-prem solution. I'm dealing with medical records. I'm dealing with sensitive information. Does Google have tools in terms of databases to support kind of any flavor of AI application?
Absolutely. So if you go into our Alloy DB database, which actually one slide down, maybe it was on a different slide. Okay. Alloy DB is a vector-powered database, and one of the things which we are actually doing, and we announced it next, is building vector capability into nearly all of our databases. Nice. I think so. Practically any database you choose can be leveraged for some of your AI projects.
I love that. Okay, safety first.
Yes. Cool. Moving ahead. So. This is a diagram which I really like, right? On one end, we are at the horse, riding a horse, and now we are trying to get to the self-driving car, right? And I know you've been playing around a lot with Code Assist, right? Because I'm taking this step back to say, okay, databases, yes, we are now making so many advances in databases. How are we heading as far as application development is concerned? So how's been your experience using something like Code Assist to start building applications?
Oh, wow. It's honestly, I wish I could, I'm seeing the DeLorean on this slide here. I wish I could go in a time machine and tell young Chloe in her early programming years, like, this is going to be a lot easier for you in the future. Because truly, I envy anybody who's learning how to program in this day and age, because it's like we said before, it's literally like having someone there in the console, in the IDE, to be able to ask questions to. And a lot of questions that sometimes I'm afraid to ask, like, explain this code that I wrote a day ago. So it appears in really interesting ways. And just like we talked about earlier, I'm still having to train myself and my brain on not to do my usual, which is Googling the error code, or even just Googling like database, which one, into Google, and getting into this flow of not only prompt engineering, because we do have, of course, the chat within the console and we can ask questions there, or the explain this feature is a really,
I love that feature.
Fan of that, because oftentimes I'm looking at code going, what is this? And I wrote it.
Yes.
But where it really has been a shining beacon of hope for me is testing, because so much of development, as everyone who's tuning in, like the context switching of it all, like I was explaining to someone that typically when I get to the testing portion of my development, I have to go take a lap. I'm like, I gotta go get a coffee. I gotta think about my life choices before I completely context switch. So I love all of that. I also just love, I previously came from the error logging and reporting space. And so I'm a huge fan of any tool that can just point to something and say, here's the error, here's the exact line that it's talking about. Oh, here's a autocomplete function that can help you fix that. So it saved me a lot of time, but I think more than anything, because it really does show itself throughout the whole life cycle of the app, from deployment. I mean, there's so many things we can get into in terms of like analytics and everything like that, but really it's just been efficiency for me, like getting the answers that I need a lot sooner than me Googling it would be.
Absolutely. I think if you look at what engineers want from AI today, these are all the tasks you do on a daily basis, right?
This is my day. You're looking at, put a live stream in the middle.
Live stream and social media stuff and all of those things, right? So if you look at all the tasks which a developer needs to do, and to borrow some of the terms from our SRE friends, right? The difference between work and toil. Toil goes into all these repetitive tasks which you do on a daily basis, which really doesn't add value to the organization, right? But unfortunately, we have to do it. So that's where one thing which I really appreciate about Gemini Code Assist and the related tools is that it really focuses on reducing the toil which you have as a developer, right?
Yeah, less toil.
Less toil.
We got to think of a good rhyme. Less toil, more foil. Let us know in the chat.
Yes.
We can do better.
I'm sure you have better Broadway lyrics than that, Chloe. So cool. And one of the things which is becoming very interesting and thing which our organization, our team is focused on is how can we bring AI assistance across the software development lifecycle? Because yes, code assist is fantastic. It helps you while you're in the IDE, but what happens after that?
Yeah.
There are so many steps to which happen after that, which really hamper enterprises, and a great example is code reviews, for instance, right? Say if you're an organization which writes code in Go, and you only have 2 or 3 people who can review your Go code, now they become the bottleneck, unfortunately, and they are all getting overburdened with all the code which now developers are being able to generate using AI tools. Right? So can we automate that? So we've been looking at all these various phases of software development and seeing, hey, how can we automate a lot of those things using Gen AI tools or otherwise, right? So things like being able to do code review, performance review, doing automated release management, and so on. So that is something our team is very much focused on.
Yeah, it really, I think when I was first coming up as a developer, there was this term of full stack software engineering,
Yes.
right? Where like, I know the full stack, I know the front end, I know the back end, I know like all of it. And we've really come to a time, it feels like in being a developer and programming, that you do need to be a Jack or Jill or Jane of all trades.
Yep.
You really need to have at least a little bit of knowledge, if not an expertise in various parts of the life cycle. And I'm looking at this here, and this is covering a lot of ground. I mean, everything from scaling, which previously was me just like diving into so many docs and like trying to figure out how to scale my app, to just like asking a simple question like, hello, please help me scale this.
Yeah, so one of the things which we announced at Google Cloud Next is Google Gemini Cloud Assist. I always use the terms differently.
Very similar.
So, similar. So one of the things which it actually does is a lot of the things which we are talking about here, where it can actually look at your overall Google Cloud instances and actually give you recommendations. You can ask it a question saying, hey, how is my VM utilization, or how is my database being utilized, and so on. And it can even go into logs, give you, like what you were saying, hey, there's error code. What does this mean?
Yeah.
And it provides you a nice multi-turn chat where you can have this conversation with this nice, helpful person who understands these errors, and it's going to help you how to fix it.
Yeah, what's great is like, I love learning new things, and I love that I'm now learning what tools are available to me within what I already use to make my life easier, to just like streamline it and be like, all right, cool. I think Charity Majors did a really great reference in her section of the Next Developer keynote about, it's when you're trying to debug, it's always about finding a needle in the haystack.
Yes.
But this makes the needle just a little bit more visible, just like a little bit easier to be able to find the unknown unknowns, I think she called them.
Absolutely. And once you find a needle in the haystack, what do you do with it as well, right? Because yes, there's one thing finding an error and then knowing how to fix it.
Yeah.
So this is something which we've been as I said, we've been working on all the various stages of software development, right? All the various steps involved in it. The one which you see with the Gemini logo.
Little star.
That little star. I always wonder if it's a star, it's like a 4-point on thing. But
Ooh, I love this. This really shows me like where and when I can be using Gemini throughout my process.
Exactly.
I'm a visual person. I love this. Okay.
So we are actually looking at what are the kind of gains which we can give to customers by using Gemini-like tools. One of the questions we got asked, when actually it was at Next, we met with this large financial organization, and they said, hey, can you help me predict the risk score of a particular code change I'm about to roll out? Because based on that, I could apply more reviews to the code and have maybe a different validation process for it. If it's a very low risk change, I can let them roll it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And this like really, like what I love about that diagram is, for me, I'm always having these moments, I won't say moments of crisis, but they do feel like crisis in the moment sometimes, where I'm like, okay, I'm facing this really hard problem. Can I use Gemini for this? It's like rewiring my brain to be like, do I Google this or I use Gemini? Usually Gemini is pretty helpful.
Yeah, I would writing documents, everything is becoming Gemini one way or the other.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Gen AI apps with databases, right? Right. Everything is an LLM, right? Right. Is there anything without LLMs these days?
Huh.
Broadway shows.
Broadway shows, yeah.
But yeah, so essentially, LLMs are providing so many innovative ways for people to use technology. You have AI with natural language, you have AI as an API call, and you also have in-place API. I think one of the examples I think we were discussing the other day was improving catalog-based apps
Yes.
to actually using Gemini in a very, very easy manner, right?
Yeah.
All we were doing was taking a user's profile and user's characteristics and sending it to Gemini so that the product description which shows up for the customer when they'll search for a particular product is actually based on what their characteristics are. So this is a great example of how you marry your operational data, which is in a database, with AI.
These are so, what I love about this is when, in the past, when I've thought about how AI would be incorporated into like a shopping experience or something like that, I would think, the algorithm on various social media apps always knows it's like, it's pink, it's sparkly, let's send it to her. I usually buy it. But it's so true though, that when you can have a customized experience in the description that, a description of an item for me may be a very different experience for the same item described to someone else.
Yep.
Like maybe different keywords or different things that are going to, different features that are going to be more interesting to me. And this curated shopping experience, exciting yet dangerous for my bank account.
Very, very dangerous for me as well. So these are some of the common things which people are using LLMs to do, right? Sentimental analysis, summarized learning, content generation, translation, etc. But the thing which makes things more meaningful is when you can ground a lot of those things in your own data, right? Say, for instance, if you are an enterprise trying to build an application which needs to provide end data to customers, and this, let's say, even if it's a chatbot, you want to provide answers which are much more contextual to the customer, right? So that is where I think vector databases come in. Quick talk about vector. It's all about numbers.
Okay.
Right? It's basically a numerical representation of a word, phrase, or object, right? And we have vector databases.
I see you've been looking at my search. I am searching Barbie and Ken all the time.
I think half the world has been for majority of the last year, I think so, right? So once you have that data, what you're doing is you're actually creating your vector embeddings, which is ultimately these vector representations of these objects and storing it into a database, right? So that when you actually do a request from your app, it can actually go to the database, fetch the appropriate vector embedding, which is contextual to you, and send it to the model, so that when the model responds, it is actually giving you a much more specific answer to what you're trying to do.
I love this because, this is a great example I see weird Barbie here. A lot of the various things that I see, may show up for my dad as Oppenheimer related, for example. So it's very specific to my own purchases experience, maybe like interaction on the app ahead of time, it seems.
Absolutely. And actually, we are starting to use this technology in some of our products as well. So one of the capabilities which we announced at Next was the ability to customize Gemini Code Assist. We call it code customization. What that entails is, because right now, if you're using Code Assist, you've been using it for a while. If you ask it for a certain code suggestion or certain information, it gives you things which are more from the open world, right?
Sure.
Basically, it's more generic. But as a developer, you're always operating on a code base which your organization has. And you want suggestions which are much more specific to it, whether it is using certain APIs or following certain coding conventions and so on. So that is where we are providing this code customization capability for Code Assist, right? What that means is we will provide a managed RAG service to customers so that they can bring in their code base. Essentially, the service will be able to connect to code repositories like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket, and pull down information so that it will generate the vector embeddings in AlloyDB, which is our vector database. And when you send a request from your IDE, what Gemini Code Assist will do is pull the appropriate vector embeddings from the database and send it to the model, so the suggestion you get is much more contextual to you.
I love anything that's going to save me time. And if folks after this, don't leave the live stream right now, but there's a really great demo of this in the Next developer keynote this year. Specifically the section with Guillermo Rausch, and also in Castlin's section as well, where we're able to just generate a class like, hey, explain what this line of code does. Great. Make me another class that helps with, instead of flight seats, like, flight, airport, make a class about airports. That's not what we do in the demo, but check it out later. And I think, as someone for that particular demo, I had no Vercel experience whatsoever. And based on the context of the app that we were using Gemini in, I was able to suddenly be a Vercel expert, which
wonderful.
Would have never thought I'd say that in my life.
Yeah, doing a live demo in front of 20,000 plus people.
No pressure.
No pressure, right? So getting back to the question of databases, so essentially, why do we need databases in Gen AI? We need them to store the vectors which we are generating from our data, and also to ground answers, right? Because one of the concerns which people have with Gen AI is hallucinations, right? How do we prevent hallucinations? And using databases to actually ground your LLM is a fantastic way to reduce hallucinations. So essentially, if you look at our picture, we're essentially GKE, Cloud SQL, essentially Vertex AI, essentially builds you a powerful Gen AI app. And there's a GitHub repo link as well, which people can follow along if they wish to.
Great. Ooh, I'm so excited for people to get their hands on it, get started. I know we have a lot of people probably in our chat, we'll check the questions soon, who've got lots of questions about this.
Yeah.
Anything you think, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking, for people who are completely new to AI, and maybe even a little bit scared of AI, what is the best way to get your brain thinking? Because as I mentioned before, I've had to sort of rewire my brain to do prompt engineering when it comes to my code, or even just remember that I have the explain this feature. It's something I've had to retrain my brain to do. Do you have any tips for folks who are maybe completely new to adding AI into their database processes and are trying to find those moments of helpfulness from Gemini, so to speak?
Absolutely. So if you, one thing which I would always say to customers is, if your Gen AI usage is not powered by your underlying business case, it has no value, right? Because ultimately, Gen AI is a tool like any other, right? Gemini is also a tool to accomplish your means. So your means has to no, the reverse, right? The ends have to be justify the means, right? So when it comes to using Gemini for your databases, the thing which we announced at Google Cloud, being able to just understand databases using Gemini, being able to ask questions about, hey, what kind of database would be well suited for such and such use case? How do I configure my database? Or what are the parameters to tune as far as my database is concerned? That actually demystifies database to a whole extent for people. I would say, don't be afraid of AI, because I was saying this to somebody the other day. When we meet customers, you get this mixture of hope and anxiety from people. Hope is that, hey, Gen AI is actually going to make my work a lot easier, and I will be able to do newer and better things. The anxiety is that going to affect my job? Right. So as I always tell people, it's actually going to make it's not going to get rid of your job. It's actually going to make your job simpler, and not necessarily simpler. It'll actually eliminate the toil parts of your job. So that you can actually focus on things which you are really meaningful.
Shall we take a little break and dive into some questions? What are you thinking?
Sounds good.
I think we got some great questions in the chat here. We're going to take a very short, teeny tiny little break. We'll be right back in maybe a minute, maybe a little minute or two. And we're going to answer questions from our audience live on the air. No pressure. All right. So we will see y'all back here in just a minute, and we will be answering your questions. We'll see you shortly. And we are back with your questions. But first, before we get to our questions, we're going to get to one of my favorite comments here, which is from Elliot. Shout out to Elliot, who when I said my little pun earlier,
Yeah.
I think I said less toil, more foil. Not
Or
great.
can you be the foil to my toil?
I do love that. Elliot said, less toil to make us spoiled.
Spoiled.
I love it, Elliot. Thank you so much. I'm going to put that in my back pocket for future presentations. All right, we've got a lot of juicy questions here, so I think we'll dive in with the first one. This is from Shelly. Hi, Shelly. And Shelly is asking, when will Gemini with Cloud SQL be in GA?
I don't know if we can say a specific date yet. I think the best we can say is later this year.
Later this year, soon, coming soon.
Coming soon.
To a code base near you.
Right.
All right, next question is from Rajan. Instead of building a ODS, can I connect all the databases of various enterprise apps, say SFDC application, Oracle application, Coupa, etc., with Gemini to draw the right insights?
There could be some interesting ways to do it. If you have to build any kind of vector embeddings, unfortunately, you have to connect it to a vector database and build those embeddings. So if you have to ground the answers which Gemini is going to provide using that, then that is required. I don't think there is much of a way around this. But if you're doing it certain places where, let's say, you want to, like the example which we are using, right? When you want to display their information relevant to a particular customer. Let's say in this particular case, he's talking about Salesforce and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So what if you could fetch all the information about the customer from Salesforce, about maybe what are the products he's using, and maybe you're trying to craft an email, which typically some business development representative sends to a customer. If you could take all the information which has been there in Salesforce, synthesize it, send it to Gemini, so that it can actually prepare like a summary of, hey, this has been our interaction with you over the last few years. This is what you've been up to, and you could probably get it to craft an email. So in those kind of scenarios, yes, you don't need to create an ODS to do it, because right now you'll just fetch it using an API and pass it to Gemini using that. And Gemini has a million context windows. So you can obviously pass a lot of information, but obviously you don't want to do that
I
every
love
time.
that example because it's using, I think a lot of times we think of databases as just like, it's a lot of information, but really contextually putting it into a scenario like, oh, generate this email. Like,
Yep.
I love how that all pulls it together. Thanks, Rajan. That was a great question. This question is from Matthew. Mm-hmm. Can Gemini be integrated with MongoDB, and if so, how?
So integrated is a slightly loaded term.
Yes.
Right? So you could connect any data store to Gemini, right? Depending on what your usage is. You could pull information from the database, pass it to Gemini. If that is what he is referring to as integration, yes, that is possible today, right? But I'm guessing he's probably referring to, hey, can Gemini provide me guidance on, hey, how to configure my MongoDB store and so on? I'm not sure if that is there on the roadmap for MongoDB. Maybe MongoDB is working with us on that. That is something which probably MongoDB has to address rather than from our perspective.
Okay, this one, similar question. This is from Yamo. Mm-hmm. Can Gemini be integrated with MySQL?
So we have MySQL available as a managed database through our Cloud SQL offering, and Gemini is fully integrated into that. And you have Gemini in databases to provide you guidance on how to use Cloud SQL, whether you're creating a MySQL instance or a Postgres instance or MS SQL instance. We have full guidance, and the Gemini databases will help you with that.
And what I love about when I ask Gemini about any kind of SQL stuff, oftentimes it'll even give me the code that I need to put in my code base, and I can just click copy or insert the code, and it's just all in one spot. Really, the lack of context switching is really my favorite part of all of this.
Exactly.
Just being able to have it less copying and pasting from an unnamed website that I'm often getting information from. Great. Okay. Let's see. I am going to go to this question. Here's one. Great hearing about Gemini Code Assist. Would love to start using it. How do I do that? That's a great question. Where do I start?
Yeah, Gemini Code Assist is already GA and it's available for everyone to use. So if you have a Google Cloud account, actually for personal users, you can go into Google Cloud account and start activating it. And I think for a while it's free to use. So if you're in a personal account, and for enterprises, they can actually go buy subscriptions to use that. It is, I think, $19 per user per month if you have a 1-year term, and you can activate Gemini. The admin in your Google Cloud organization needs to just turn on the Cloud AI Companion API and give you the right permissions for the developers, and then you're good to go.
Fun. And we also have that GitHub repo link that folks can check out. That was on a previous slide. I don't know if we're sharing it now. You can also get your hands dirty with the GitHub repo. All right. AlloyDB sounds interesting. Is it compatible with any open source databases?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So AlloyDB is completely compatible with Postgres, for instance. It's actually leverages Postgres engine, but it's almost 6 times, if I remember correctly, faster compared to your traditional Postgres. And one of the cool things about AlloyDB is it can serve like so many different purposes when you're building your applications using AlloyDB. So it can act as a transactional store for your application. It can actually act as a vector database if you are using it for your Gen AI pieces. It can also do some amount of real-time data analytics if you want to use it for that. So that's where I think AlloyDB becomes a very attractive option for people to build their applications.
Love that. We got a juicy question here from Girish. Will the AI integration to database completely remove the dependency of SQL? Since there is an intermediate vector DB search in between, will it affect performance and increased cost in any way?
I think I want to break those questions into two almost. I think one is, will it completely remove the reliance on SQL? Depends.
Yes.
Right? That's my politically correct and neutral answer on that. I think SQL will continue to exist because there will be situations where there are so many people who are experts at writing SQL. I am not one of them, right? For people who are like new to SQL or are like not very comfortable with SQL, this does offer like an easy way to use databases and so on. But there will be people who will like fine tune SQL statements who have that expertise. For them, this is not as valuable, right? Because for me, it provides a great starting point. But when it comes to like fine tuning those queries and so on, those will still be important. I think there was a second part of that question as well, right?
Since there is an intermediate vector DB search in between, will it affect performance and increase costs in any way?
Let's talk about the cost part. Yes, you are incurring some cost because you now have an additional resource which you need to operate and manage. But when it comes to the performance thing, the vector searches are vector retrievals are very fast, right? Because AlloyDB, if you're using AlloyDB, has an amazing performance capability. So I don't think that will add the overhead, but the cost is definitely one of the pieces. But is the cost of getting a non-grounded answer or like a non-contextual answer higher to you than having this cost of the database?
Different tools are different things, for sure. Okay, we have one here that, this is a great question. This is from Charlie. How does Google use data sent to Gemini Code Assist? We get this question a lot.
Yes, we get a question a lot because there's a whole concern among customers saying, hey, we are sending you this data, which is very sensitive in a lot of cases. How is Google using the data? The categoric answer is we do not.
We do not.
We do not use the data to train our underlying models to the extent that when you're using Code Assist, we don't store the prompts, we don't store the context, we don't store the responses. So in fact, when customers run into issues and they reach out for help, we actually have to ask them, hey, can you send us the prompts as well as the response which you got so that we can provide you a more informed answer as to why an issue occurred.
Yeah, I feel like that's the number one question. Am I training the LLM with my data? No. We promise you.
Yeah.
But when you are working in your own code base within Gemini, what I really love about that kind of like circularness of it is I can ask very context-specific questions about the code that I'm working in. And that's really kind of the beauty of using Gemini within your own code base is, no one else is going to be able to query their code and say, what does this class Chloe rules mean? It'll actually be able to explain it specific to my code. Okay, I think we have time for one more question here. We're going to take our final question. So this question is from Robin. Hi, Robin. Robin asks, if I have data in BQ, how can I engage Gemini to get insight of my data to identify important features? Assume the data set has like 100 plus tables.
I'm not a BQ expert, so I don't know how qualified I am to answer that. But there is Gemini integration into BQ, which I think it has gone GA now, where you can actually ask it for insights on some of the data, which is already there in BQ, if I'm not mistaken. It can generate queries for your BQ. As well as even generate insights. Actually, there is a huge element of Gemini, which is now built into Looker as well, where you can use Looker to gather insights on the data which is in BQ. And that is actually being powered by Gemini. Sorry, I'm not an expert on BQ.
No, I would just say to Robin, when in doubt, explain this. That's one of my favorite features, or even just prompting the chat, like, hey, tell me, like, using BQ, how can I blah, 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 blah. Like, that's really been the most value of the in-chat. It seems so weird. I keep thinking back to my AOL Instant Messenger days. This is going to date me a bit, of how I used to chat with Smarter Child and get an immediate response. And I was like, how does it know? And like, is it a real person? And I think that's what's been really cool about, it takes just a second or two to open a new tab, search a couple terms, figure out what you're doing. But what I love about these answers is when you're asking Gemini for help with maybe a tool or a database or something that you're not used to working with, Vercel, like I mentioned earlier, it really is like having an expert with context of my code base answering those questions. So I'd encourage you, Robin, and reach out on Twitter. Let me know how it goes. To see how Gemini handles specific questions around your code base around that, because I would imagine it's going to not only point you to documentation, it's going to point you to all the resources that you need to get that.
And give you examples as well too.
Yeah. Great. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. I can't believe we're at the end of our time. We didn't talk about Broadway. Sorry. We only have a limited amount of time to talk about databases, AI, everything like that. Any final thoughts, last words, things we want to share with the lovely folks at home before we wrap things up?
The one thing which I would say is like people tend to actually try some of these things out. And essentially, we have pointed to the GitHub repo and go try those things out and let us know how you feel about some of the products which we are coming out with, because we are very focused on making AI simpler for people, because Gen AI, certain people think, oh, it is only good for chat, right? We want to kind of change that narrative and see it can actually be applied to everyday applications, even existing applications you have in innovative ways, right? So try those things out and let us know how you feel.
It's like sprinkling a little bit of pixie dust on things almost, I feel like. Again, I wish I could go in this DeLorean, take young Chloe by the shoulders and say, don't worry, you're not going to have 200 tabs open while you build this very simple bookshelf app. But I think that's really been the magic of it, is suddenly I've gone from, we typically all start from scratch when we're building an application, but it's like having this really helpful coworker next to you all the time that you're not going to interrupt their flow state. You're not going to bother them by asking any silly questions, and really is an expert on all the things.
Sounds good.
Great. All right. Well, that is all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us live today, or if you're watching the on-demand version, hello from the past. Hello, future people. We had so much fun. Please join us for our future live streams. We have a lot of them coming up over the next couple weeks. And feel free to reach out on Twitter, LinkedIn, let us know any questions or things that pop up. And we will see you next time on Cloud on Air. Bye, y'all.